I never knew my father. He died when I was just 3, leaving behind nothing but a handful of photos and a single video of him holding me as a baby. My name's Elizabeth, and this is my story. Growing up with my mom wasn't easy. She was always afraid of being alone, cycling through boyfriends faster than I could learn their names. It was a revolving door of men, each one leaving as quickly as he came. The only stability in my life came from my grandmother, my mom's mother. She was my rock, my safe haven. Whenever things got too chaotic at home, which was often, Grandma would swoop in and take me to her place. "Come on, Elizabeth," she'd say, her voice warm and comforting. "Let's go make some cookies." Those weekends at Grandma's were like entering a different world. Her house was always quiet, peaceful. No shouting, no slamming doors, no strange men stumbling around in the middle of the night. Just me and Grandma, baking cookies, reading books, or tending to her small garden. I often wondered about my dad's parents. Mom told me they'd cut ties after Dad died, disapproving of her moving on so quickly. But I suspected there was more to the story. Mom wasn't exactly reliable when it came to the truth. School was my escape. I threw myself into my studies, partly because I enjoyed learning, but mostly because it was a distraction from the chaos at home. Mom was rarely involved in my education, or anything else in my life for that matter. I learned to be independent out of necessity. By the time I was 10, I was cooking my own meals, doing my own laundry, and helping myself with homework. Mom was too busy chasing her next relationship to bother with such trivial things. Everything changed when I turned 12. Mom finally got married to a man named Frank. She was over the moon, convinced he was her last chance at happiness. "This is it, Lizzie," she gushed. "We're finally going to be a real family." But Frank had other ideas. From day one, he made it clear that I was an inconvenience, a reminder of Mom's past that he'd rather forget. "Listen up, kid," he growled at me on the first night he moved in. "I don't want to see or hear you unless it's absolutely necessary. You stay in your room and keep out of our way. Got it?" Life under Frank's rule was a far cry from anything resembling a real family. He ruled our house with an iron fist, and I quickly learned that silence and invisibility were my best defenses. "You think you can just freeload off us?" Frank would snarl. "You're gonna earn your keep, girl." And earn it I did. Every penny spent on me was accounted for and expected to be repaid through chores and perfect grades. While my classmates sported new clothes and the latest phones, I shuffled around in hand-me-downs, clutching the ancient Nokia my grandmother had given me. "Why can't I have new clothes like everyone else?" I once dared to ask Mom. Her response was quick and dismissive. "We can't afford it, Lizzie. Be grateful for what you have." But I knew better. I'd seen the designer bags Mom brought home, heard the plans for weekend getaways with Frank. There was money, just not for me. At school, I stuck out like a sore thumb. But to my surprise, my classmates were kind. They never teased me about my outdated clothes or ancient phone. Instead, they often went out of their way to help. "Hey Liz, want a ride home?" Sarah, a girl from my math class, would often ask. Her mom would smile warmly at me from the driver's seat, a stark contrast to the cold shoulder I got at home. I'd gratefully accept, knowing the alternative was a long walk home. Mom and Frank had made it clear that picking me up from school was not on their list of priorities. "You've got 2 legs, don't you?" Frank would say. "Use 'em." At home, there was no rest. Frank had an endless list of chores for me to complete. Cleaning, cooking, laundry, the work never stopped. And heaven forbid if I tried to take a break. "What do you think you're doing?" Frank's voice would boom if he caught me sitting idly. There's always work to be done in this house. Homework was to be completed perfectly, with Frank regularly checking my grades. Anything less than excellent was unacceptable. "A B-, he roared one day, waving my report card in my face. "You think that's good enough? No TV for a week. And forget about seeing your little friends." I'd nod silently, fighting back tears. The punishments were harsh, but arguing only made things worse. So I'd retreat to my room, bury my face in my pillow, and let the tears flow silently. Weekends at Grandma's became my lifeline. But even those were under threat. Frank had discovered a new form of punishment, denying me my visits to Grandma's house. "You failed that history test," he'd say with a cruel smile. "Looks like you'll be staying home this weekend to study." It broke my heart to lie to Grandma when she called, worried about my absence. "I'm sorry, Grandma," I'd say, forcing cheerfulness into my voice. "I've just got so much schoolwork. I'll come next weekend, I promise." But next weekend would come, and Frank would find another reason to keep me home. It was a vicious cycle, and I felt powerless to break it. As I approached my 15th birthday, I made a decision. I needed some independence, some way to escape the suffocating control at home. So I applied for a job at the local diner. To my surprise, Frank approved. "About time you started contributing," he grunted. The diner became my sanctuary. The owner, a kind-hearted woman named Marge, took me under her wing from day one. She was everything my mother wasn't: caring, attentive, and genuinely interested in my life. She'd often let me leave early, especially on weekends. Those stolen hours with Grandma were precious. I'd arrive at her house, breathless and grinning, and she'd welcome me with open arms. "Elizabeth, my dear, what a lovely surprise," she'd exclaim, pulling me into a warm hug. I never told Grandma the whole truth about life at home. I couldn't bear to see the worry in her eyes, or worse, risk her confronting Mom and potentially losing my visitation rights altogether. So I kept my struggles to myself, painting a rosier picture than reality. As my 18th birthday approached, a tiny spark of hope flickered in my chest. Maybe, just maybe, things would change. Perhaps Mom and Frank would finally see me as an adult, worthy of respect and kindness. How naive I was. The morning of my 18th birthday, I woke up with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. I got dressed carefully, putting on the nicest outfit I owned, a hand-me-down blouse from a cousin and a skirt I'd found at a thrift store. Taking a deep breath, I stepped out of my room, half expecting balloons or a happy birthday banner. Instead, I was met with Mom's cold stare. "Oh good, you're up," she said, her voice devoid of any warmth. "I have news. I'm pregnant. We'll need your room for the baby. You can go wherever you want, but you can't stay here anymore." I stood there, stunned. Of all the scenarios I'd imagined for my 18th birthday, this hadn't even been on the list. "But, this is my home," I stammered, my voice barely above a whisper. Mom's eyes hardened. "This is my house, Elizabeth. You've been a burden on Frank for far too long. I need a calm environment for my pregnancy, and frankly, you stress him out." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. A burden? A source of stress? Was that all I was to them? "Where am I supposed to go?" I asked, fighting back tears. Mom shrugged, her indifference like a knife to my heart. "Go live with your grandmother. Get a job. I don't have money for college, so you're on your own there. But I expect you to come back daily to clean the house while Frank's at work." "I can't do it in my condition." With that, she thrust a hastily packed bag into my hands and all but pushed me out the door. The lock clicked behind me with a chilling finality. I stood on the porch, my meager possessions at my feet, trying to process what had just happened. On my 18th birthday, instead of celebration, I'd been discarded like yesterday's trash. I trudged up the familiar path to Grandma's house, my eyes red and puffy from crying. Before I could even knock, the door swung open, and there stood Grandma, her face lighting up at the sight of me. "Elizabeth, happy birthday, my dear," she exclaimed, pulling me into a warm embrace. Then, noticing my tear-stained face and the bag at my feet, her expression shifted to concern. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" I broke down again, sobbing into her shoulder as I recounted the morning's events. Grandma listened, her face a mix of shock and anger. "That girl. I can't believe she'd do this to her own daughter," she muttered, shaking her head. Then, squeezing my shoulders gently, she said, "Well, you're always welcome here, Elizabeth. Always." She ushered me inside, where I was greeted by the mouth-watering aroma of freshly baked cookies, my favorite chocolate chip ones. "I was hoping you'd stop by today," Grandma said with a wink. "Come on, let's get some food in you." As I sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by all my favorite treats, I felt the knot in my chest begin to loosen. Grandma bustled around, pouring me a glass of milk and piling a plate high with cookies, mini sandwiches, and fruit. "Now," she said, sitting across from me, "we're not going to let your mother's foolishness ruin your special day. Why don't you call up some of your friends? We'll have a little party right here in the backyard." Overwhelmed with gratitude, I hugged her tightly before reaching for my phone. Within an hour, several of my classmates had arrived, bearing gifts and warm wishes. The backyard was soon filled with laughter and chatter. The smell of grilling burgers and hot dogs wafted through the air as we played games, shared stories, and simply enjoyed each other's company. For the first time in years, I felt truly celebrated. As the afternoon wore on, I made frequent trips into the house to refill the pitcher of Grandma's famous homemade lemonade. During one such trip, I overheard Grandma on the phone in the living room. "Yes, that's right. It's time," she was saying, her voice low but firm. "I think you should come as soon as possible. Tomorrow morning would be perfect." I paused, curious. Who was she talking to? And what was it time for? But before I could ponder further, I heard her wrapping up the call. "All right, I'll see you then. Thank you," she said before hanging up. When I entered the living room with the refilled pitcher, Grandma was there, smiling as if nothing had happened. "Having fun, dear?" she asked brightly. I nodded, deciding not to ask about the mysterious phone call. Whatever it was, I trusted Grandma. After all, she was the one person who had never let me down. The morning after my birthday, I woke up in Grandma's guest room, feeling more rested than I had in years. I was helping Grandma with the dishes when there was a knock at the door. To my utter shock, it was Mom. "Elizabeth," she said, her voice uncharacteristically soft. "Can we talk?" I stood frozen, unsure how to respond. Grandma gently squeezed my shoulder and nodded, so I stepped aside to let Mom in. She looked different. Smaller somehow, and definitely nervous. In her hands, she clutched a gift-wrapped package. "I'm sorry about yesterday," Mom began, her eyes darting around the room. "I don't know what came over me. Here, I got you a birthday present." I took the package mechanically, too stunned to speak. "Please, Elizabeth," Mom continued, her voice taking on a pleading tone. "Come home. We can work this out." Grandma, who had been quietly observing, spoke up. "I'm glad you've come to your senses, dear," she said to Mom, her tone firm but not unkind. "But I'm afraid it's too late to change things now." Mom opened her mouth to argue, but at that moment, the front door opened. An elderly couple stepped in, and I watched in confusion as all the color drained from Mom's face. "Hello, Elizabeth," the woman said warmly, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "Happy belated birthday." The man beside her smiled and added, "We've been waiting a long time to meet you, sweetheart." Grandma stepped forward. "Elizabeth, these are your paternal grandparents. I asked them to come." My mind was reeling. The grandparents I'd never known, the ones Mom had always said wanted nothing to do with me, were here? And Grandma had invited them? They enveloped me in a warm hug, and I found myself instinctively relaxing into their embrace. "We have a lot to tell you, Elizabeth," my grandfather said, his voice gentle but firm. "Starting with the truth about your home." Over the next hour, they unraveled a story that left me speechless. The house I'd grown up in, the one I'd been unceremoniously kicked out of just yesterday, actually belonged to me. It had been left to me by my father and put in my name by my paternal grandparents after his death. "Your mother was allowed to live there with you," my grandmother explained, shooting a pointed look at Mom, who seemed to shrink under her gaze. "But now that you're 18, it's your decision who lives there." I sat there, trying to process this bombshell. All those years of feeling like a burden, of being told I should be grateful for a roof over my head, and the house had been mine all along? I own the house? I stammered, my mind struggling to grasp this new reality. My grandparents nodded, while Mom sat silent. As I sat there, still reeling from the revelation about the house, my paternal grandmother gently took my hand. "There's more, Elizabeth," she said, her voice soft but firm. My grandfather nodded, his eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and resolve. "We've been sending your mother a monthly allowance ever since your father passed away," he explained. "It was meant to cover your expenses, clothes, school supplies, anything you needed." I felt my jaw drop. All those years of wearing hand-me-downs, of being told we couldn't afford new clothes or school trips. Had it all been a lie? "We wanted to be part of your life, to help raise you," my grandmother continued. "But your mother, she was against it." I glanced at Mom, who was standing in the corner of the room, her face a mask of discomfort and shame. "We didn't want to cause any trouble," my grandfather added. "So we kept in touch through your grandmother here. She's been sending us photos and updates about you all these years." Grandma nodded, squeezing my shoulder supportively. "And that's not all," my grandmother said. "We've been saving for your college education. We gave the money to your mother to set aside for you." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. "College money?" I echoed, my voice barely above a whisper. I turned to Mom, who was now visibly squirming. "You told me there was no money for college. You told me I was on my own." The room fell silent, all eyes on my mother. She opened and closed her mouth several times, no words coming out. Finally, Grandma spoke, her voice uncharacteristically stern. "Tell her the truth, Amanda. You owe her that much." Mom's face cycled through various shades of red and white. We," she stammered, then took a deep breath. "Frank and we spent the money." The silence that followed was deafening. I felt like I was in a surreal dream, or rather, a nightmare. "You did what?" My paternal grandmother's voice cut through the silence, sharp as a knife. Mom flinched. We needed it. We bought a car," she finally blurted out. "A car?" my grandfather repeated incredulously. "A luxury car," Mom added, as if that somehow made it better. "We needed it. Frank's job, appearances are important, you know." I stared at her, unable to comprehend the level of selfishness and deceit. All those years of scrimping and saving, of being told I was a burden, and they had been living it up with money meant for me? The room fell into a stunned silence as the magnitude of my mother's betrayal sank in. I felt a surge of anger rise within me, hot and fierce. "You're a fraud," I spat out, my voice trembling with rage. "You kicked me out of my own house after robbing me blind for years." Mom's eyes widened, and she held up her hands defensively. No, Elizabeth, you've misunderstood everything," she pleaded. I was going to surprise you for your birthday. I was going to tell you about the house and the money." I couldn't help it, I let out a bitter laugh. "Oh, you surprised me all right," I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "Kicking me out on my 18th birthday was quite the surprise." "Congratulations, Mom. Mission accomplished." My paternal grandfather stepped forward, his face stern. "Amanda," he said, addressing my mother, "you need to return the money for Elizabeth's education. Immediately." Mom's face contorted with anger. "I'm not giving anything back," she shrieked. "Do you have any idea how hard it's been raising her on my own? That money is compensation for everything I've done." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Everything you've done?" I echoed incredulously. "You mean neglecting me, making me feel like a burden, and stealing from me?" Mom turned to me, her eyes wild. "Elizabeth, stop this nonsense and come home right now," she demanded. Something inside me snapped. "It's my house, and I want you and Frank out. Now." Mom's face crumpled, and she pointed at her stomach. But I'm pregnant," she whimpered. "You can't throw us out. Where will we go?" I looked at her, really looked at her, and felt nothing. No sympathy, no guilt, just a profound weariness. I could see that while her pregnancy might be real, her tears were just another manipulation tactic. "That's not my problem," I said quietly. "You should have thought about that before you stole my future." Grandma stepped forward and put her arm around my shoulders. "I think it's time for you to leave, Amanda," she said firmly. "You've done enough damage." As Mom continued to sob and plead, my paternal grandparents exchanged a look. "We'll be pursuing legal action to recover the stolen funds," my grandfather stated. "And we'll be helping Elizabeth secure her property." I watched as my mother's face cycled through shock, anger, and fear. For the first time, I saw her for what she truly was, not the loving mother I'd always longed for, but a selfish, manipulative woman who had put her own desires above her child's well-being. The weeks following that fateful confrontation were a whirlwind of legal consultations, paperwork, and emotional upheaval. With the support of my grandparents, both sets of them, I found the strength to stand up for myself and pursue justice. We filed multiple lawsuits, one for compensation for moral damages, another for the misuse of the monthly allowance my paternal grandparents had been sending, and a third for the return of my college fund. Each document I signed felt like a step towards reclaiming my life. The most difficult lawsuit to file was the eviction notice for Mom and Frank. Despite everything, a small part of me still hesitated. Was I doing the right thing? "You're not leaving them homeless, Elizabeth," Grandma reassured me, sensing my doubt. "They're adults who made their choices. Now it's time for you to make yours." The day of the court hearing arrived all too quickly. I sat in the courtroom, my stomach in knots, as the judge reviewed our case. Mom and Frank sat on the other side, shooting me venomous glares. As the judge began to speak, I held my breath. "In the case of Elizabeth versus Amanda and Frank Thompson, this court finds in favor of the plaintiff, Elizabeth." The relief that washed over me was indescribable. The judge continued, detailing the court's decision: full compensation for moral damages, repayment of all misused funds, return of my college fund, and the eviction of Mom and Frank from my house. I watched as Mom's face contorted with rage. She jumped to her feet, screaming obscenities, while Frank sat stone-faced beside her. As the bailiff escorted them out, Mom's final words rang in my ears. "You ungrateful brat. After everything we've done for you." Those words, once so hurtful, now held no power over me. I knew the truth, and no amount of guilt-tripping could change that. The following weeks were a flurry of activity. Mom and Frank moved out, leaving the house in a state of disarray. It was cathartic, in a way, to clean and reorganize, erasing the traces of their presence from my life. With my newly recovered funds, I was able to enroll in a prestigious college in another city. The day I received my acceptance letter, I cried tears of joy, something I hadn't done in years. As I packed for college, I couldn't help but reflect on the whirlwind of changes in my life. In just a few short months, I'd gone from a neglected, gaslighted teenager to a homeowner and college student with a supportive family. The day of my departure was bittersweet. I hugged Grandma tightly, promising to call often. "Don't worry about the house," she assured me. "I'll keep an eye on things while you're gone." My paternal grandparents drove me to my new campus, helping me move into my dorm room. As we said our goodbyes, my grandfather pressed a small box into my hand. "It was your father's," he explained. "We thought you should have it." Inside was a beautiful watch, engraved with the words, "Time reveals truth." How fitting, I thought, considering recent events. As I settled into college life, I found myself thriving. Free from the constant stress and negativity of my old life, I discovered a passion for learning and a confidence I never knew I possessed. I made new friends, joined clubs, and even started volunteering at a local youth center, hoping to help other kids who might be in situations similar to what I had experienced. Throughout it all, I maintained close contact with both sets of grandparents. Weekend visits home became something I looked forward to, filled with love, laughter, and the warmth of true family. As for Mom and Frank, I heard through the grapevine that they'd moved to another state. Mom had given birth to a baby girl. Part of me felt a twinge of sympathy for my half-sister, hoping she wouldn't endure what I had. But I knew it wasn't my responsibility. I had my own life to live now.